Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Delivering Innovation for Telco Transformation, presented by Total Telecom in partnership with Intel. This is the Artificial Intelligence track, and our panel of experts will be discussing topics including integrating AI into telco products. Towards the end of the session, there will be an opportunity for Q&A, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat function within Zoom. First up, we have some opening comments from Glenn Harris, who's the Strategy and Business Development Manager from Intel. So I'm pleased to introduce Glenn. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to this AI session as part of the Delivering Innovation for Telco Transformation series. As was in the introduction, my name is Glenn Harris from Intel, and today we have three guests on our AI panel discussion. They are Richard Benjamins, Chief AI and Data Strategist at Telefonica, Jukka-Pekka Salmankeita, Director of AI and Machine Learning at Elisa, and Azadeh Yazdan, AI Sales Specialist at Intel. So firstly, by way of introduction, I'll summarize Intel's overall approach to AI with 4 slides. We will then move to the panel discussion. So moving to that. AI analytics are, of course, amongst the defining workloads of the next decade, driving disruptive innovation across the data-centric landscape from cloud to edge. With the help of Moore's law and cloud efficiencies, we see AI moving from the most sophisticated organizations to permeating every application. With AI, there is a multitude of different business models and applications. There can be no one-size-fits-all to the approach or to satisfy the diverse range of AI requirements and use cases. At Intel, we are already seeing AI make its impact on everyone's daily lives, both in visible and invisible ways. The possibilities for this class of technologies is almost limitless. Here you can see some of the big challenges that AI is helping address across a multitude of industries, from agriculture to telecom. For example, agriculture, achieving higher yields and increased efficiency, and in education, transforming and the learning experiences, and in health, revolutionizing patient outcomes, and in media, creating truly thrilling experiences, and in transport, we are seeing, of course, the emergence of automated driving, and finally in telecoms, driving new network and operational efficiencies and new revenue opportunities. So we understand that with increased digitization of telco operations to support the growth of 5G and edge computing, telcos are seeking operational savings and also leveraging network AI capability to monetize and drive new network revenue growth. Network AI maturity levels will naturally vary depending on ecosystem readiness and adoption in network locations. And AI needs to be incorporated as part of the fundamental network design principles. Telco vendors are, of course, designing AI and analytics-based engines that can intelligently manage 5G RAN and 5G core network conditions to achieve network KPIs, network automation, energy saving, and operational flexibility. And we understand with complex 5G networks and services, telcos require automated operations. 5G network slicing automation, perhaps, is a good example, where we're forecasting the key KPIs of the network slices and taking proactive actions such as allocating radio and compute networks resources. Telco AI use cases exist end-to-end, from device to data center and cloud. Media analytics at the edge, security and in SD-WAN, network automation in core, OSS, and the RAN network, and with bots, of course, to improve customer service. Intel is working on all these key use cases with our partners and others to enable network AI as part of the solutions on Intel's product portfolio, software, and tools. So finally, it's Intel's mission to power AI transformation by building the world's best AI computing platforms using Intel's complete technology portfolio and offering common interfaces across all products. We are working with the ecosystem to simplify AI development, building a thriving AI builders community of partners using Intel AI technology, from public cloud providers to OEM platforms and solutions integrators to ISVs. We're also delivering at the solution level making AI easier to adopt and deploy through ecosystem-driven solutions, customer use case POCs, and Intel Select solutions. We know that today's AI won't be tomorrow's AI, so we are pioneering leading-edge AI through attracting top talent, performing and sponsoring advanced research, participating on advisory boards, doing strategic mergers and acquisitions, and funding startup programs, and finally, helping to shape public policy. We're also optimizing software for peak performance on Intel hardware, along with our ecosystem of partners providing complete end-to-end pipeline for data science, from ingestion of data through to preparing, analyzing, and acting on the data. We're optimizing software solutions that our customers are actively using, including popular open source frameworks, topologies, and more. And we're building a unified AI that truly gives our customers a platform with a unified experience across the products in our portfolio, and that is open source and embraces popular standards and translators. And finally, on hardware, the fact that Intel processors are pervasive in the world's data centers gives us the opportunity and responsibility to deploy AI to the masses by extending the platforms to deliver even higher levels of built-in AI performance. We've already made some dramatic improvements through software optimizations and hardware architecture innovations, and that's just the start. The market demands all kinds of different processing solutions, and Intel is unique in our ability to address them all. But having a big technology portfolio isn't enough. There is also integrating those offerings into common platforms that makes them truly more than the sum of the parts, including processing, memory, I/O, packaging, internal and external IP, interconnect, security, and more. So with that, let's turn to the panel and the first question. Maybe I address this first to you, Richard. Where do you see the greatest opportunity and priority for the value of AI to be realized by telcos, at the edge, in the network, and in the enterprise?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Glenn. Hello, everybody. It depends a bit on the horizon, yeah. Definitely in the future, or not so, in the near future, when 5G and edge computing becomes more important, I think then AI will be very important in that respect. But as of today, I think the largest value of AI is created in the enterprise itself, yeah, by applying it to all kinds of internal use cases related to understanding better the customers, improving your marketing, optimizing the network deployment phase, optimizing your procurement processes. So any significant process that moves a lot of, let's say, money, if you can optimize that small percentage, that generates already a lot of value. And if you sum that up, all those different use cases, you can come up to a significant amount of money.
Thanks. And Jukka-Pekka, what are your thoughts on this?
I would highlight that on the telco side, we still have a great amount of work to be done on the OSS side, just like squeezing out the performance and reliability of the fundamental net. So like getting higher level of automation in place in service assurance processes, getting higher level of closed loop optimization in the network settings, and those kind of things. And there's absolutely no reason to wait for 5G to start on these areas, that like service assurance optimization topics. They have been around for ages, and it's like those are not the quick and easy wins, but they are really the big wins that can be studied and acted on today, and then it will be even more important when 5G and related like services adding to the complexity, that we have the fundamentals in good shape.
Thank you, Jukka-Pekka. So that's the enterprise and all the OSS side of things. And Azadeh, what's your views on this first question?
Well, I think AI has to become the core of business for telcos, and those who make AI the core will succeed. And that means AI everywhere, every single part of business. But then there's a short term and there's a long term, as Benjamin mentioned. And we all know that now everyone is looking at two different ways of utilizing AI in telcos. One is around network operations, making networks automated, and the other one generating revenue streams. And especially with data being generated every step of the way, and operators being able to leverage that data throughout the entire customer journey, whether it's through device data, network data, billing, geolocation. All of this data can be used to generate new revenue streams. And at the end of the day, where your compute is closer to the edge is where you can get the most benefit, and that's where enterprise focus and edge focus come to the picture. So I think they're all important, and they're all part of should be part of any telco's strategy. There's just a short term and a long term, and that will also depend on each telco's needs and a strategy. There's really not a one size fit all.
That's fair enough. Thank you for the comments there. And let's build on the first comments from Richard. Maybe we'll start with you again, Richard, but what new business and delivery models for telcos do you see enabled by AI, and what are the barriers to adoption and scale for those new services?
Yeah, okay. I can give you a concrete example what we've done. So once we got the data basics in place, and we could do a significant amount of use cases without spending too much effort on data access, data quality, etc. We also started to see data as a product. Yeah? And what we did is to package up insights from our network data in an aggregated and anonymized way, and then sell those insights to other sectors like the transport sectors, the retail sector, public administration, and recently also with COVID, of course, mobility insights for propagation of the virus. Yeah, so that is now an established business, and indeed, this is for customers using data. This is a new way for them of doing business. Yeah, so they have to move away from the old-fashioned way by, for instance, by gathering data through surveys, and they can rely on, let's say, information from data. From big data from our telco network, but that requires time, and so that is one of the challenges to scale this up. It's not so much a technical scale up; it's mostly a market scale up, in that the market needs to learn that this works and that this is going. We see an acceleration in the last few years, but if you look at the revenues, of course, you still cannot compare those kinds of revenues to telecommunications revenues.
No. So building future revenues. Jukka-Pekka, your thoughts on these new business models? Oh, I think Jukka-Pekka is frozen there. Can you hear me, Jukka?
Now I can. Network on the fly. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, right. Yeah, sure. So we were just talking about new business and delivery models and services that the telcos can monetize and that are enabled by AI. And what are the barriers to the adoption and scaling of those services? And your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in our case, like the background has been building up the ML capabilities for our internal use, and really like working on how to make the operations more effective, more smart internally. But during the past 5 years, we have like expanded from that scope based on the learnings we did internally, and we have now like an industrial side offering where we are doing this Industry 4.0 kind of overall smart manufacturing cockpits, a bit similar exercises what we did for our own service operating center operations, and how we built up the AI capabilities in that side. And that's a separate business area, and where we are working with different kind of manufacturing clients and also on the supply chain management issues. And that's more a case that we took the competencies and our experiences on how we how we had been implementing these things for our own purposes, and then we are now applying those in adjacent industries. And then on the telco side, we are nowadays also a vendor in the sense that we are packaging some of our in-house solutions for external customers, especially the service assurance. Let's say 0-person network operating center concept is one of the solutions in that area. So for us, this internal competence development and then these new business initiatives, it has been very like intense interaction between these, and we have been like pivoting and finding out the best ways of like really packaging the overall offering for enterprise customers.
So very much you are your own incubation engine then for these new scale services and scaling. So an interesting approach. And Azadeh, your thoughts as you work with the industry in this area?
Yes, there are a few different barriers in adopting AI. Some are unique to telcos, the other ones are across verticals and industry. I think the main barrier comes from within organization. So putting technology aside, management and making mindset change, because adopting and deploying AI requires changes in processes, changes in mindset. And a lot of times we see that there are parts of the organization that are committed, there are other parts of it that are not committed. And I think as Richard was mentioning, there's still skepticism around in different parts of the organization on the ROI. So I think having these silos within the organizations and not having a cohesive strategy and this mindset change is one of the main barriers for adoption of AI. The other one is data and data governance. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, telcos and service providers can collect a lot of data and across customer journey, but that also creates its own challenges because you want data to be collected and stored in a way that you can eventually drive insight from. And a lot of times, the problem that I've encountered working with telcos is that as the data, the way that's being collected is not in a way that can be used, or there are differences in the types of data, so that data governance becomes another issue. And I think the third one that I would mention is that a lot of times there's a hesitance because telcos are afraid of how AI implementation and deployment will affect legacy systems. So that's another infrastructure issue that's not necessarily unique to telcos, but that's a common problem that we see. And the last one that I would say is skill sets. And obviously, data scientists are in high demand these days, and telcos competing for that skill set is also a challenge if they plan to create everything internally. Having that skill set is important, and that's another challenge. And a lot of times we see that challenge is overcome by maybe partnerships and outsourcing some of the resources, but in general, I see these 4 challenges to adoption of AI.
Thank you, Azadeh. I mean, let me come back to Richard and Jukka-Pekka on that. Richard, some observations there from Azadeh. She works with the industry. Any responses or any thoughts about that as you actually apply AI within Telefonica and watch it being applied within the broader telco community?
Yes, of course. I think the internal challenges, I would say, like 5 years ago, they were still technology related, but today it is more culturally related. So it's about how you organize yourself in terms of creating value from data. So depending on the companies you are in, but some companies have like what they call a data board, where all the, let's say, the businesses and the technical data people, the AI people come together and decide what are the priorities to work on. Such kind of schemes, when companies become more mature, using these kind of technologies are more likely to see. Companies that are earlier on the, let's say, on the journey, they really struggle with breaking the silos. There are still people who are, let's say, kind of doubting whether this is really needed. Sometimes they feel threatened. They are kind of detractors of this because they feel threatened. If you, in the end, if you share your data with the organization, that means that you lose also some kind of control, and maybe you lose some kind of power, because it's not only what you say, it's what others can say about what's happening in your organization through data. So I think that is a big challenge for companies. Another thing that we've learned is, and we've come over that happily, luckily, is that what is the economic value that you get from this? So if you start with this kind of technologies and you make investments, and large companies have made lots of investment in that, at some point of time, you need to look at the return on investment. It's not always easy to demonstrate that in an easy way, because usually the technology is only a part of the value chain. And sometimes you have even fights, they're saying, oh, no, this is because of the data. No, this is because of a better customer relation, or this is because of what. So these are all kind of challenges that you have to overcome and have to learn to find a pragmatic solution. Otherwise, you can create great insights from data and perfect conclusions from AI. But if you can't scale them through your organization because of cultural or organizational barriers, then it won't serve you a lot.
Got it. Some great observations about the cultural side of using AI within telcos. Jukka-Pekka, any thoughts from yourself or from what Azadeh?
So like, if I take that kind of emphasis that we do apply ML in like kind of two areas. In one area, we are like cultivating insights and digging deep on information, but it's still enough to get like the information out from the system. And then we are doing parts where the system is operating differently. We are changing the settings in the radio network side, or we are like doing some part of the service assurance process fully automated and those kind of things. And in this second category of things, it's not enough that you are like doing some new ML module by itself. You need to be like changing the way how you are actually operating or running whatever processes. And if we think from this like change management perspective, it's about getting like the people on board, and some people might not have the roles they used to have. So it is like a non-trivial change from that perspective, but also it's like redoing your technological systems, not only adding the ML part, but you need to really like think through, do the software development, process development around that. And it's like multidisciplinary. I like to say that we need to have the data science part of the competence, but then we need to have the relevant software engineering, and then enough of the domain expertise, be it radio network related or whichever the area is, and all those like three competence groups need to be working like together as a one team, and that takes time and practice. It's not like overnighting, and it's definitely not happening just by doing more data science.
Right, interesting. So various views there. I'm going to go back to something to Richard touched on earlier. COVID-19, obviously at the front of everyone's mind at the moment, and be interested to understand how you think that telcos have responded to COVID-19 epidemic using AI specifically. Jukka, maybe you could just continue to comment around that area actually. And
yeah, so that. No, please, Jukka.
Yeah. Well, for us internally, it has been like positively smooth. So like a high level of automation combined with like already having a corporate culture that virtually everything can be done remotely. Of course, it's like from personal perspective, it's like annoying not to be able to meet people face.
We lost him.
It's largely due to the good infrastructure. Okay, so this.
I think this is probably an example of what Jukka-Pekka
what's wrong with my laptop.
actually commenting to there. So whilst Jukka-Pekka looks at his laptop there, Richard, did you want to pick up on this theme of AI and COVID-19?
Yeah, I think we were all, I think, a bit afraid of what would happen to the network. Yeah, with from in March, like 80% of the population working from home. I think we from mid-March in Telefonica, we were 99% working from home. Everybody using these kind of video conferencing things. I think in March alone, we used all our network projections for the whole year. Yeah, they were done in 1 month. But surprisingly, I'm not sure surprisingly, but at least in most of our footprints, the networks they hold on well, and really it has now changed a lot. Even the culture, yeah, when we started, 5% of people were working from home. Now it's still around 80%, and in the company it's like 90%. So we think it will have a long-lasting impact on how the companies are run and how the economy works. Now, specifically, we've done actually a lot of stuff with our data, with our anonymized and aggregated mobility data. We shared it with the national government, a lot with regional governments. We share it along with 14 other European operators. We share it with the European Commission. And all this is for giving the governments a better understanding of how the virus propagates, how populations are following up on the mobility restrictions, yeah, potentially detecting hotspots, yeah. So gatherings of large group of mobile devices that were usually are not there, and all those kinds of things, they can help governments to take decisions. Yeah. But I also have to say that across the world, I think maybe 60 or 70 operators have done this kind of work, but it is still very different, and there's a lot of variety how governments are prepared to take such digital insights into account in their decision making and their policy making. So I think that's something that has become very apparent in those months, and I really hope that for the future that will change.
Yes, yes, that policy and regulation, I'll come back to a little later on if we've got time, for sure. Azadeh, what have you seen in this era of COVID-19 and the use of AI?
Well, I think telcos have responded really well with urgency, technical savvy. Basically, they've been the backbone of communities for us to be able to move forward with our lives during this pandemic. And as we were talking about it, providing network and connectivity for healthcare system, that has been a key. If you want to meet remotely with your healthcare system, even within hospitals, the connectivity there. For government, in some cases, tracking people and for social distancing, more importantly, education, classrooms, providing, virtual learning environment. All of this has been because of this network and operations that's been provided. I think what COVID-19 has done is that some of the trends that we were seeing before, it has actually accelerated those. Basically, digital transformation, it's something that COVID helped to expedite. And I think that's something that telcos needs to bank on and continue to work on. Like a lot of the businesses moving forward will have to connect with their customers digitally through online channels. A lot of employees may choose to still work remotely, and that might be the preference. Online education might become a trend. So some of these will have a lasting effect moving forward. And with all of that becomes an opportunity for telcos to utilize AI as you're getting more traffic to your network using AI for network automation, routing traffic, understanding better behavior of your customer, providing that personalized experience and that personalized connection to your subscriber through AI. That would be another area. And I think where AI will really help is as these networks are being utilized more, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So AI can help handle some of these repetitive tasks and basically free up employees' time to work on more sophisticated tasks. And I think that would be one of the key areas that AI can help as telcos grow and expand in the future.
Okay, thanks, Azadeh. I mean, let's build on that point then with the guys there that are actually at the heart of these telcos doing this. Jukka-Pekka, you're back with us. Hopefully you can hear us clearly. From your perspective, building on what Azadeh was saying, what does drive greater adoption of AI in at the telcos, especially during this kind of COVID-19 era, and then as we look out beyond it? What are your opinions on that?
Well, for this COVID era, I think it's still most fundamental responding to the usage pattern changes, because virtually overnight the office areas became like lesser used and residential areas became like with totally different kind of traffic patterns, and responding to those changes and making sure that the communications is like universally available with good reliability. I think that has been like extremely important and underlined during these COVID times. And to the degree that AI machine learning is helping keep the systems running, help in adapting to these changes faster than earlier, it's like serving this. But I think this is from societal perspective the biggest thing that telcos are contributing right now.
So Richard, Jukka-Pekka makes the point there that the AI is really assisting that operational side of the networks. From your perspective, what do you think will really drive greater telco adoption, AI adoption, sorry, at the telcos at a greater pace?
Yes, I agree with Jukka-Pekka. Of course, the operation of the network is an important part of that, I would say. In addition, we've also seen an increase in automation of, let's say, of manual and repetitive tasks in order to be able to deliver, to attend more customers. And we've also seen an increase in the use of digital assistants, because customers have many more questions and issues, especially because the amount of lines and fiber, etc., connection that have been bought have increased significantly. Yeah? So in order to deal with that, we have needed to use much more AI to be able to attend all those demand.
Okay, and as we see this greater adoption of AI, and we think about the ethics around AI, what ethical dilemmas do you see that are associated with AI for the telcos? Maybe Richard, you could comment to that and just carry on what you were just saying, actually.
Yeah, no, I think there is a general issue on AI ethics, which also affects telco, but not specifically. It affects all industries and some more. So there is a lot of, let's say, concern about some of the undesired consequences of AI. Yeah? We speak about black box algorithms, we speak about bias and potential discrimination against variables that you actually could not use. It's about systems that have too much autonomy for the tasks they are doing. So maybe you need human oversight, privacy aspects. So that is general in the world going on. And telcos, because they are using AI significantly, so I think they need to make a statement about that. Yeah? So in this sense, Telefonica already in 2018 made a public declaration on its AI principles, which are now being implemented across the company. So that is something that is going on, and there are many telcos that are doing the same. But I also must say that telecommunications is not the most exposed industry to the ethical concerns. Yeah, much more exposed are, for instance, the insurance sector, where they accept people or reject people, or they ask money or premium depending on characteristics. Financial services with mortgages and with loans. Public administration. Of course, you cannot discriminate. You cannot take opaque decisions if you decide whether you let a student study at the public school or not. The transport sector with self-driving cars. So I think this is important for telcos. They need to position themselves, but luckily they can learn from other sectors which are much more affected by them. Yeah.
Got it.
And also, if I may continue here, it's also good to remember that no matter like how important these ethical considerations are, we still have a great amount of AI use cases that don't involve directly the end users and really don't have the kind of ethical dilemma. So if we are using better anomaly detection system to monitor on pharmaceutical biological production process, that process doesn't have ethical considerations. If we are doing better SMT line on electronic semiconductors industry operations, it doesn't have any ethical considerations. And same thing on the telco side. If we are able to do better energy saving features on the radio network side, are more effective in the energy consumption per terabyte of traffic transferred, it's good for the environment. It's definitely not like against someone's ethical principles. I would hope that we are more effective in that area. And I'm just like highlighting that there are great many areas where machine learning is applied that are not ethically sensitive. And we shouldn't like overemphasize the problematic areas when we have also like many areas where those concerns don't apply.
Right, got it. And Azadeh, again on that. Oh, sorry, Richard, were you going to comment there?
No, I just want to say that I fully agree. Yeah. So it's sometimes it's a bit overhyped and everything is wrong and bad, etc. But if you listen to people who, let's say, complain about it, they always give the same examples. Yeah. And there are so many other examples that are not affected.
Yeah. Right.
And I think it's a bit like European thing as well. We want to be worried just to be on the safe side. And sometimes we overemphasize that a bit.
Got it. Interesting. Azadeh, what have you seen in this area of ethics as you've worked around the world?
I think for me, ethics when it comes to telcos is a fine line between ethics and cybersecurity. I think that's where I think most issues with AI will come into the picture, especially for the younger generation that is now, because of this virtual environment, now have to spend a lot more time online. And especially because now there are third-party apps that are running on these operators' networks. I think managing those becomes a concern. I mean, having an 8-year-old, I think that's personally a concern of mine. I was reading, I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, somewhere in Middle East, there was this bot that was getting through WhatsApp to young kids who were playing games, and it was threatening them that if they quit interacting with the bot, the bot will kill them or kidnap them, and then it would start exposing them to content that was not appropriate for their age. So it scared a lot of kids, and I think I read somewhere that one of the kids wanted to do a suicide. So I think that's where, for me, the ethics of AI and how it relates to telco come into the picture, especially being open to third-party applications.
Okay, so
may I comment? May I give a small comment on that? I think it's important to distinguish between the malicious use of AI, which is that is an example, yeah. So it's an intended malicious use of AI versus a unintended negative consequence of AI. Yeah? So those are very different things, and the whole the worldwide discussion on AI ethics is mostly focused on the unintended consequences. Yeah, that you do medical diagnosis, which as such is good, but as a by effect of this technology, you diagnose white people better than black people, for instance. Yeah. Of course, there are many ethical questions about the future of work. Yeah, will they take all our work, all this technology, and what about lethal autonomous weapons? Yeah. So, but those are in the end, those are explicit decisions that people take. Yeah, and now people can make a wrong ethical decision, etc. But this is not the technology. Yeah, the technology is an instrument that boosts the intentions of what people want to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and let's it follows on from that as we go into regulation of AI, and should AI in fact be regulated? And if yes, how should telcos respond to that regulation? And if not, why not? So I don't know, Richard, do you want to carry on building on your previous point in that regard?
Yeah. So this is actually a very hot topic, yeah, because there is no regulation at the moment horizontally for AI. Of course, there are all kinds of regulations and laws about what people complain about AI. I mean, it's not allowed to discriminate against race or against political conviction, or we know all the protected groups and the sensitive variables. So if an algorithm discriminates, an algorithm of a company, the company is wrong, yeah, and it goes to courts if somebody finds out. So it's not that AI is doing specifically new things that needs to be regulated. Yeah? The question is, if AI is doing it, how do you detect it? How do you enforce it, etc.? And that's an ongoing discussion. I think there are different views. So, for instance, the European Commission's view currently, because there is no regulation at the moment, is that you should distinguish between high-risk applications and non-high-risk applications, and then high-risk applications, and also between, let's say, high-risk use cases or applications. I mean, for the first one is high-risk sectors, yeah, and non-high-risk sectors, and then high-risk applications and non-high-risk applications. And you should regulate maybe the high-risk sector or the high-risk application in a high-risk sector. Yeah, as an example, medical diagnosis in the medical sector is high risk, yeah? But a queue optimization program for a hospital, which is also an AI program in the healthcare, is not a high risk use case. Yeah? So you have to. This is the current way of thinking, and then the discussion is also whether you should regulate the outcome or the process. Yeah, and mostly, of course, it's the process, as in the GDPR, and there are some proposals about what process you actually should regulate, like the data quality. Did you look sufficiently at the quality of the data to avoid discrimination or bias? Did you document well? Is it explainable, understandable? So there are some categories that they propose, but no decisions have been taken yet. Yeah, and then there are other parts of the world that have different opinions. And if you go all the way to the big tech like Facebook, yeah, they even ask themselves to be regulated because they don't know anymore how to handle it.
Interesting. Jukka-Pekka, do you want to build on these points about regulation?
Yeah, I would be a bit cautious with regulation because after the fact, after some bad things happen, it's usually easy to pinpoint what should have been regulated. But when you try to regulate just to be on the safe side, whether you're actually like looking at the correct issues and items and whether we have enough foresight to like regulate the right kind of things, that's a bit like tricky. So it's right kind of balance of being like safeguarded, but not so that we try to like too stringently control everything in this area, and finding the right balance here will be the interest. And I think this high risk, low risk kind of sectors, and then the high risk, low risk applications within those sectors, that should be like setting the tone of like how strictly things should be controlled.
Yeah, absolutely. One wonders if we end up with AI assisting us to work out how AI should be regulated eventually, but another application. I mean, on the back of regulation comes liability. And what can telcos do to limit their AI-related liabilities? Jukka-Pekka, what do you think on that? How are these kind of where there are risks, how are these liabilities kind of limited for the telcos?
Well, on the liability side, I think it's absolutely clear that the telcos are in much worse position here, at least with European legislation, typically in different European countries, compared to the over-the-top kind of application. So if we look at all the specific regulation that is here for communication services, when telcos are doing that, and be it because of reasons of AI or any other reason, if we fail that, like the consequences are very severe. Then we compare players like Facebook or the Chinese ones and so on, and how they are doing the communication services and what legislation is actually applied to them, and they have like totally different rules. And I think this is just an observation that we already today play by two different rules, and the telcos are the one that play with the hard rules with regard to the consequences.
Got it. What do you think, Richard, when it comes to this
So
liabilities
I
and
understand.
how you
Yeah, I understand this question as if telcos use AI either in their B2C market or in the B2B market, and something goes wrong, who is liable? And this is actually European Commission is studying whether AI has a specific new thing that needs to be regulated separately beyond the current laws on liability. So I think the first thing is that there are some considerations or discussions whether connectivity should be part of that liability discussion. So suppose you run an AI system or you deliver connectivity to an AI system, the connectivity fails, the AI system fails, and then who is liable? So there's even some discussions going that telcos should be liable for this AI failure, which I personally think doesn't make sense. It's like electricity. If the electricity goes down, then well, it's not the product that it's not your coffee machine manufacturer that is liable. It's the energy company. Then there are other things. I think there is, in the terms of the B2C part, I think things are pretty much organized. AI doesn't give anything new. If you deliver something to a customer, whether it uses AI or not, and it breaks down, well, you have the current liability laws, I think, that apply. But if you are in the B2B space and you build, together with third parties, you build an IoT solution for whatever, that might be a high risk application. It might be to a hospital, it might be to the mobility or the transport sector. And then actually the liability question is is important if you use AI, but still, I think as long as there is no autonomous learning once the system is in production, everything stays the same as it was. Yeah, because AI is just a software, and if you launch it into the market, you understand the software and you agree with the specifications that they work for your business problem. And if the AI system complies with its specifications, but still you fail, then it's your problem. Yeah. If the AI system doesn't deliver on its specifications, then it's the manufacturer. The only thing that is different is the case if you, as I said, continue to learn autonomously once you are launched into the market. But then, because then there is no human oversight of what is going on, and that might create some uncertainty, and I think that's under discussion. But otherwise, I don't see a huge amount of differences in liability issues with AI or without AI.
Got it. And Jukka-Pekka, I mean, you made the point earlier about different kind of, on the ethical side, different kind of lenses to look at it through. If we build on what Richard was just saying, and this liability side, network operators have traditionally had strong KPIs with their suppliers for the equipment and all the rest of it. But with AI being a part of it, is that part then of the KPIs for the networks? Is it something that is the responsibility of the TEMs and the OEMs and the rest, or how do you see that actually coming about in terms of liability of network operations?
Well, on one hand, if we look at the network side only, on one hand, we will have these slices and guarantees for the slices, and that will be then reflected also on the business side negotiations, whether, for example, penalties, liabilities are tied to the SLA breakdowns. So I think we will see like interesting development with regard to the 5G in that area on the network connectivity side. But I would still come back like one step on this liability, especially on this business to business side, that compared to like traditional software, when you have the ML components, there's this ML ops, a bit like DevOps is for the software operations, ML ops side of solutions and frameworks, and thinking through that, like what are all the things that you need to consider over the lifetime of the system. And for example, if the incoming data is changing, how quickly do we need to notice that the models that were trained with the old data that is no longer reflected by the current reality no longer like apply? And do we notice this kind of thing? And when we notice this kind of thing, how do we trigger retraining of the model, and how we make sure that the new model is working as intended? And it's these kind of things where like we don't have like that well established practices in general in any industry. It's being heavily worked on by great many players, and it has been like recognized as a problematic area for the past roughly 5 years or so. But still, like I think that will be like the technical side of this liabilities discussions, that we must have at the technical system the means of actually coping with the changes, and some of those changes are different than what is in the traditional like more fixed software solution. But I think that this applies to the like business to business side, not really the B2C part of things.
Got it. Interesting. So then, switching over finally to as we think about AI and partnerships, and the previous point I was making about these partnerships, of course, that the telcos have with their suppliers. So as we think about partnerships, in your opinion, are the new ones forming? Are there different partners from before? For example, the cloud providers, smaller kind of industry incumbents, the SIs kind of getting more involved, the whole kind of ecosystem. Richard, are you seeing new partnerships forming within Telefonica, and where's that being driven and why?
Of course, yeah. I mean, this is not the world we live in like 20 years ago, where there were a few vendors. Telcos definitely, from providing connectivity, at least a significant percentage of the telcos have tried to move up in the value chain. Moving up in the value chain, some have tried to do it by themselves. Probably they all failed, but most of them are just partnering. Most telco companies have a kind of venture fund where they invest in companies, they try some companies out, sometimes they buy companies. Well, Intel is also very big in those kinds of activities. But so there is a whole ecosystem of small startups, SMEs that offer niche services for businesses and also for consumers. That is completely different now. Yeah. Then also what we see indeed, cloud providers. Yeah. We started like 10 years ago. We had most of our things on premise. I think now we have most of our things in the cloud. Yeah? Sometimes private cloud, but sometimes parts are even in the public cloud. And we also see that it's not a lifetime partnerships with one provider. Sometimes it's like a lifetime relationship with 2 or 3 partners in the same area. Yeah? So we work together with Microsoft, with Google, and with Amazon. Not because we can't choose, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Yeah? So yes, and those are. So I think partnerships in the core business, they become longer term. So it's not so much about getting the best price, but it's really about the partnerships. And with startups, it becomes very agile and dynamic. Yeah? If something works, you promote it. If something doesn't work, you kill it.
Yeah. And Jukka-Pekka, I mean, let's build on that. You know, this cooperation and co-creation, they're so essential to develop new AI-enabled operational applications and operations quickly. You know, where have you seen this happening with new partners, and where do you think we feel we need more of it?
Well, I repeat the cloud providers here in this, and I take that in a broad sense, not only like the Google, Amazon, Microsoft, but also like companies like Databricks that are like operating AI data handling solutions on cloud-based infrastructure.
Yeah.
Solutions, this MLOps included, but all the frameworks and so on, that is to large degree led by this, or let's say the cloud providers are in very central role here. They are not the only contributors, but they are very significant contributors in this area. And from that perspective also, so that we are close by and we don't try to reinvent things on telco side, where perfectly good solutions have been done in other sectors. I think that is like one driver, at least on our side, why we are like working closely with them and using them as a like foundation for many of our solutions. And then of course in a growing area you have great many different startups and established companies and so on, and it does make sense to be for you find ones that are like really good ones, and some of these partnerships will be for learning purposes, and some of those will be ending up, for example, as acquisitions that you really like get close to each other in that area and build up a joint offering.
Got it. And finally, Azadeh, you know, as we know, Intel's been working for some years now on AI builders and working with the ecosystem. What are your observations about the way the ecosystems are developing now?
Going back to partnerships, I think it's key for telcos to build up on those new partnerships. We see a lot of efforts being stuck in a proof of concepts and not getting to scale. And a lot of it is because those new partnerships needs to be formed for these proof of concepts to be scalable. Part of it is it's impossible to have all of the knowledge, all of the expertise in-house to deploy such complicated and complex systems, both from infrastructure perspective and both knowledge perspective. So we see a lot of telcos working with ISVs for specific verticals to deliver those services, something like content recommendation. These things have been there for some time, but not at the level where deep learning is applied and it's highly personalized. We see partnerships in those types of areas. There is also, as everyone mentioned, partnerships on the cloud side, and even cloud service providers provide some of those services as an AI as a service model. So the key to success to implementing these AI solutions at scale for telcos is actually these new partnerships that are different from a few years ago.
Thank you, Azadeh. So we've come to the end of our time here. Thank you so much for all your views and insights over the last hour. We very much appreciate your time, Richard, Jukka-Pekka, Azadeh, and of course, last but not least, the audience. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you have any questions afterwards, then please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
bye.
Bye.